Well, I'm joined now by the boxing writer James Garner, who, after Hayes' defeat of Audley Harrison, called the champion a contemptible human being, not to his face. No love lost there then. And by Frank Wiechula of the Daily Express, who says Hayes' pre- and post-fight behaviour is all a part of the sport. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to both of you. Frank, where do you stand on the whole choreography of this? Does it matter that these two men genuinely seem to dislike each other? Is that manufactured? They know the rules of the game, they know the rules of hype. What do they really feel for the other opponent, who after all is a boxer like them?
Absolutely. I mean, it's genuine and it's long-standing. I mean, let's remember this fight should have taken place 2.5 years ago, but it was postponed because David Haye got a back injury. And I remember interviewing both men back at the time, and there was dislike then. Also, how
did you gauge that? Why did you feed that?
Just by talking to them, by seeing what they said about each other. You know, it's very premeditated with David Haye. A lot of the stuff he said and his actions, the infamous time when he wore the T-shirt with the severed head of the two brothers at a press conference, also one in London, that was designed to antagonise his opponent, to actually help sell the fight. I mean, he ambushed him in terms of a media occasion several months before then. It's all premeditated, it's all very clever, it's all designed to needle the opponent, to intimidate, get him under his skin and actually create the situation. But I mean, David Haye, you know, is part of the product of his environment.
James, I just wonder, you know, when we talk about the T-shirts with the severed head and all the rest of it, it's not a million miles away, is it, from World Wrestling Federation stuff and all the panto melodrama that goes with that? It's not the Corinthian idea of men.
No, it certainly isn't. And the difference between wrestling and boxing is that boxing is real, the punches are real, the intentions are real. And David Haye, at the press conference on Monday, he mentioned that that Vladimir Klitschko was going to leave the ring in an ambulance. Vladimir Klitschko asked David Haye the question. He said to David Haye, "David, do you want to send me to the hospital?" And David Haye said yes. And you've got to look at the morality of boxing. These
boxers
guys
have died. Boxers have been taken away.
Exactly. And I think, you know, we asked the question, can we allow boxing in a civilized society? I'm a boxing writer, I'm a boxing fan. Yeah. I think the answer to that is yes, but it has to be done in a certain way. It has to be done in a sportsmanlike way. And it cannot be done with boxers like David Haye saying, I want to send you to the hospital. And Vladimir Klitschko came back at David Haye and he said, "David, I wish you the best of health." And that is the spirit which boxing can be allowed in. The spirit in which David Haye conducts himself is unacceptable. And if you go back to, in the early 2000s, Mike Tyson came to this country to box. And the question was asked, should Mike Tyson be allowed to box in a British boxing ring? Should he be given a license to box? And I think the question should be asked of David Haye. Should a man who says, "I want to send my opponent into a hospital," be given a boxing license?
Can I interject there?
You can.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's not something, his trash talk and some of the controversial things he says, and he said even worse, because I've been at a press conference where he said one of them once about a previous opponent, Audley Harrison.
Tap him on the shoulder and say, "Look, you can't."
Well, I mean, he has been pilloried and criticised, he has been told to mind his language, but it's very, very difficult. It's not language I advocate or I endorse or I sponsor, but you have to remember his mindset, where he comes from. He feels basically he has to get himself up to the level of the opponent. The bigger the opponent, the bigger the challenge, the worse the invective is, which is why he produces it. Psychologically, he's gearing himself up to face the individual. The difference about Mike Tyson, it wasn't because of what he said, it was because he had a criminal conviction against him for a particularly heinous offence, which was why there was so much criticism about letting him into the country, which is different. You know, David Haye talks badly, but he hasn't done anything wrong from a criminal conviction point of view.
It's important to paraphrase Margaret Thatcher when talking about boxing, I feel. You can't buck the market, as Baroness Thatcher famously said. You can't buck the market in boxing, can you? You know, the point is, everybody's complicit. The more publicity, the bigger the crowds, both there in Hamburg and actually you know, on screen, just as importantly, which means the purse gets bigger, the audience gets bigger, and everybody wins.
We're all complicit in this spectacle, and we're all complicit in a society which sees David Haye on Monday saying, "I want to hospitalise my opponent," and on Saturday, boxing is legalised violence. On Saturday, we're giving David Haye tonight the opportunity to enact his bad intentions towards Vladimir Klitschko. He has said, "My intention is to hospitalise my opponent," and he will be given the opportunity, legalised tonight, to fulfil those bad intentions. Well, okay. Is that acceptable? That is the question we should be asking about David Haye, about his intentions, and whether or not he should have a boxing licence.
But Frank, let's put this directly, because quite clearly, you know, you are willing to attribute, to a degree, where the background that David Haye comes from for the way he talks.
And the profession that he's in.
The profession that he's in as well. But the truth is, and we can say this because it's happened before, if he knocks Klitschko out and Klitschko is taken away in a hospital, heaven forfend, with a blood clot on the brain, or, you know, it's happened before. Boxers.
And I've been at fights where it's happened.
Right, OK. And he said, "I want to hospitalise this man," before the fight. then there's a problem there, isn't there?
Of course it is. It's wrong. He shouldn't have said it. But
well, apart from the others, a court would take a dim view.
But he has said this, and also the aspect of danger or threatening health to an opponent is prevalent in every time two fighters step into the ring. All the fighters are aware of that. It's basically taboo to talk about it. But Haye, for his own reasons, for his own psychological warfare, to get himself up, says things, very unpalatable, but he says them. He's wrong to say it, but he does. That's the manner of the person. That's what drives him on.
That's interesting. I mean, let's get back to the sort of primeval brass tacks of this as well, James, that these are two men who aren't just persuading an audience of armchair boxers, but actually are persuading their corner, but more importantly themselves. They know that tonight they're going to face a considerable barrier of pain that they need to get over, and the tough talk helps.
Absolutely. I think this is an important thing to think about, and it's about what their psychological approach to boxing is, what they consider about boxing, what their moral opinions are, and the intentions they bring to the ring. David Haye's intentions, he has revealed to us, and he said in an interview last year, I must hate my opponent. I must sort of develop a hatred of my opponent. Klitschko doesn't think like that. Klitschko is a gentleman. Klitschko is just saying, I want to win a boxing match. And I remember back in the early 1990s when Eubank fought Nigel Benn, they were asked, do you hate each other? Benn said, I hate the man. Eubank said, I do not hate the man. I simply want to take his world championship belt. And what Eubank is saying is justifiable. We can accept that in our society. A boxer saying this is a competition, a physical competition. There are risks. We accept the risks. But I'm competing in this competition to test myself against an opponent, but I'm not competing to injure an opponent. If that happens, it is an accident, it is a tragedy. And actually, Eubank was there later in the fight with Michael Watson, which is one of the great tragedies of the 1990s in boxing. But you cannot put a moral culpability on Eubank, because Watson and Eubank both accepted the risks of the sport. Okay. And Eubank did not have bad intentions.
Let's just if we could, go back to a second. I remember Mike Tyson, before one of his fights, saying he wanted to push the nose of his opponent through into his brain. A terrible thing to say, but that's a product of the streets where he came from.
Okay. Which doesn't excuse it. Which doesn't excuse.
Of course it doesn't.
Let's just restore some sanity briefly, if we can, and talk about this in purely sporting terms, and get your predictions for who's going to win, Frank.
I think if Haye wins, and I've got a sneaking feeling he may well do, he'll have to win inside the distance, inside maybe the first 7 or 8 rounds. I mean, again, part of what he said is designed to try and entice Klitschko into an all-out fight, basically, as opposed to his, fighting at the end of a jab, keeping him at distance. Haye at distance. If it goes to points, Klitschko.
James?
I think Klitschko, because David Haye's biggest weapon is psychological intimidation. That is how he beat Audley Harrison, and Vladimir Klitschko is not intimidated.
James Garner and Frank Wiechula, thanks both very much indeed. The fight is tonight. We'll find out exactly what's going to happen. You can watch the fight. It's on 8 o'clock, Sky Sports HD. Box Office also available if you can bear it in 3D.